Hi there. Welcome to Beyond the Comfort Zone podcast. My name is Isra Ishaq from Physio Detective Fitness and Nutrition. On this podcast, I'll be interviewing experts about the various topics taught in fitness education to better understand the research, challenge some beliefs and biases, and provide helpful information to all the other health and fitness professionals out there who may have questions just like mine. Without further ado, let's get on with the show. Now, please remember that this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. See you soon. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first ever episode of the Beyond the Comfort Zone podcast. I'm really excited to have started a podcast. I'm really excited for us to find the best way to help those we serve. And I'm even more excited to introduce to you my first ever guest, Antony Lo. Hey, Antony.
Hey, Yusra, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to see this project take off.
You know what? I hope it goes well. Right. So I'm sure everybody who's listening to this right now knows who you are, but why don't you introduce yourself for those who may not have come across your work?
Thank you. I am a physiotherapist. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and I work at the junction of musculoskeletal or ortho, sports, and women's health. So I work with all three of those populations predominantly, but I combine all of them together. So I go from the very lowest of the low in terms of ability up to elite athletes, Olympians, Commonwealth Games athletes, CrossFit Games athletes, world champions in their sport, and everyone in between. And I have a particular interest in combining sports performance ideas, coaching ideas, as well as rehab ideas, and including highlighting the awareness of pelvic floor issues and women's health issues in all of that. So it's just my little niche.
That is amazing. That is a wealth of knowledge right there. Now, when you started this journey, I'm not sure how long ago was that. Is that what you intended to do, to get into pelvic health, or did just that happen along the way?
I think, like with most people, they end up where they love being. And so I've always grown up around sport. And so I've trained and I've coached sport. Even before I went to university, I was coaching a bit of tennis, and I just naturally was coaching different sports no matter what. I also participated in lots and lots of sports, and I obviously, as a new physio, you try to get as much experience as possible. So all of that kind of melded together. But in my first year working as a physio, I had to take care of the antenatal and postnatal ward in two different hospitals. And that just really opened my eyes to the world of women's health. I, obviously being 21, 22, I had no idea what was going on. And, it was relatively easy to learn. There was a lot to learn, of course. And I just ended up teaching the antenatal exercise classes, and there's a few different things, the preparation for birth type classes. And so I thought, okay, I really enjoy this. And I found that I was able to help people where other people were struggling to help. And I just remember getting called down to the antenatal clinic one day, and the midwife was like, I got somebody on the bed. I can't get her off the bed. She's in a lot of pain. I need you to come down and have a look. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so I go down there and I asked her to try to get up. She tried to get up and she screamed in pain, and was like, oh, okay. And I didn't know what to do. Like, I honestly didn't know what to do, but I knew enough not to do anything to hurt the baby. Yeah. Enough not to do anything to hurt the person, the lady lying on the table. So I just did some very, very gentle, we call them grade 1 to 2 PIVMs, which means that we just rocked her very gently. And I just spoke to her and talked to her about what was going on. And it wasn't even super deep. It would not look like anything I do today. I
Yeah.
just wanted to distract her for a little while I just went, oh crap, what's going on here? I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And after about a minute or two, because that's what I was taught to do, I just asked her to try again. And she popped up with no pain. She said, oh, thank you. And she ran out the door because she was late to pick her kids up from childcare. And even back then, over 20 years ago, they would charge you if you were late. And so she was running out the door. And then the midwife, she was like pushing me out the door because it was like, all right, that's it. I got to go. Like, I'm running late. I've got more people to see. And I was left standing there in the corridor thinking, I just really helped that lady, and I have no idea why, because I
Yeah.
didn't do anything. I didn't do anything, as per my training. It just shouldn't have worked that well. And so that started me off on being really interested in helping the antenatal population and antenatal pain, and then the postnatal population and postnatal pain. And that naturally evolved into having to learn about stress urinary incontinence and pelvic organ prolapse. And it just kept rolling on from there.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. It's just hearing your journey and where you started to what you're doing now, which is the next point that we are going to get into. And the main reason for this podcast, right? So the whole reason I'm starting this, with your advice, is to try and challenge what is being taught out there to health and fitness professionals, be it personal trainers, be it physios, be it anybody who is helping another person. Now, from our previous conversations and interactions, you've mentioned that how you work now is really different to how you worked, say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. What I'm interested in sort of talking about is what made that shift for you. What made you change your ways? What did you experience then that told you, you know what, this may not be working the way I was taught?
Yeah, it's a great question. And right before I launch into that, because you mentioned it,
Yeah.
I love how you ask and you challenge and you have this insane amount of curiosity, which I absolutely adore in you because I have the same curiosity. So I see a lot of your questions as being exactly the same types of questions that I have.
Thank
This
you.
does know and know and be right.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why I said you need to do a podcast on this, because one of the best ways is to just challenge what's going on out there, because it just never made sense to me. And that's why I said, do this podcast, Yusra, because people need to hear your voice and your questions. And that's exactly how I started. I was starting by doing these things, and I was seeking all these different ways, and I was trying to find the best way. And one day I got into, it was after Christmas, so I had a bit of time. It was before New Year. And I got into a bit of a Twitter discussion with Greg Lehman. And, it was funny because we went back and forth because I'd helped somebody who had pain for, like, to the point that she was going to go get knee surgery for her knee pain. So we're talking at least a few months. And she couldn't squat. And she's a CrossFit coach and a CrossFit athlete. She couldn't squat. She couldn't do a quarter squat without pain. And I was able to show her how to do some, thoracic ring corrections on herself. And she was able to squat all the way down, ass to grass, and then teach her how to do that without using her fingers. And she was able, and I caught up with her 2 weeks later, and she was able to do that. And we got into a discussion about the video that I shared, because I shared it on social media.
Yeah.
And he started challenging me on the reasons why it was working. And I just remember being really upset about, who does this guy think he is, telling me all these things that I was doing wasn't working, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
and it's on Twitter. You can go look it up, Greg Lehman and Physio Detective. And what happened? And then it went off there into many different places. So you won't get the full conversation on Twitter. But what ended up happening was this back and forth occurred over 3 days, and um, it got to the point where I said, "What are you saying that I haven't helped the thousands of people that I have? You're saying I haven't helped the thousands of people?" And he goes, "No, no, I'm sure that you're good at what you do. I'm talking about the reasons why it's working." And it hit me then that I had placed my identity in the reasons why I was helping people. And so when I look back at that conversation, I was getting upset about the fact that it felt like he was attacking me. But really, what was happening was that he was attacking the reasons why I thought, and I placed my identity there. That's why it felt personal. But when you look back, he never called me a name. He never said that I was useless. He never said that I hadn't helped people. He never said that, how can you call yourself a physio? He was always talking about the ideas around it, but I'd taken it personally. And so I'd put my fighting goggles on and saw everything as a personal attack against me. And that's when I realized that I had to change, and I had to investigate that. But not only that, I had to change how I saw questioning of ideas. And it takes years, Yusra. I tell people it took me 3 years. It's 3 years to get over the main part of it, right?
Yeah.
To the point at the end of the masterclass where you can start learning how to do things differently. It's an ongoing process. And I just finished teaching the female athlete course online, of which you're a wonderful teaching assistant.
That was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and one of the participants on it, Melissa, she said that she'd taken the course 3.5 years ago, and it was really great to see how I was evolving, because she could see the changes from 3.5 years ago to now,
Yeah.
and the fact that I have changed and I have evolved and I have pushed. And when I taught that course 3.5 years ago, I'd already been through all these changes. It had been 3 years since I'd had that argument. Over 3 years since I had that argument with Greg Lehman, who, by the way, is fantastic to follow.
I'm following him. Yeah, his work is amazing. He reminds me a lot about how you teach as well.
Yeah.
It's about the whole person who's in front of you.
Yeah, I'm probably influenced by that. I was already focused on the individual, and that through a lot of Diane Lee's work and LJ Lee's work and some of the other people that I studied under, Peter O'Sullivan. All of these people were really great at focusing on the person as well. But yeah, once I realized that I felt personally attacked.
Yeah.
Wasn't, because I was reading into the conversation from Greg, and then that's when I realized, oh, okay. And that's when I realized I had to change the way that I asked and taught, because people did get upset when I challenged them. And so it probably did get personal.
So I suppose it can be hard to try and dissociate what we do and the people that we are as individuals, right? So I'm still learning that from the master class, and just sort of, when someone is asking me something, I always try to take a step back and think, right, do I want to respond or do I want to react? So I try not to react and just think about what I'm going to say next and stuff like that. So it's all super interesting. All right, so I am one of those people, as I'm sure you already know, Antony, who jumps from one course onto another because I enjoy all the knowledge, right? Which is awesome. But before, it was more or less because I felt that as a coach, I didn't have the magic answer, right? That thing that will allow me to help everybody who comes across my way. So I was doing courses, searching for that thing. Now, Do you think there's anything that is missing in the current fitness education? That is not being taught to trainers that really should be taught. It could be trainers, it could be physios.
Yeah, 100%. I think, the foundations of thinking and challenging your beliefs and assessing knowledge before you go into assessment and management of people, I think that's super important. So the foundations of thinking, philosophy, basically logic, reasoning, understanding that people for centuries and millennia have been thinking about thinking. And it's one of the things that really sets us apart from the animals, is that we have this capacity to be meta, to rise above and think about thinking. Yeah. And by challenging that, learning about biases and learning about assumptions and learning about logical fallacies, I think none of that is really taught very well in the courses in fitness and health education, unless it's deliberately about that. Yeah. So I really do think that thinking about your thinking is important. And then being able to assess the research. It's very easy to go to Google, find a paper that suits your biases, and then post that as your evidence. But, maybe 6 people were in the study, and that's low quality evidence. Unless there are 6 people only in the world with this particular condition, a rare form of brain cancer. I saw a Mark Rober video about this. This kid was a 6th person in the world who had this rare brain tumor. Okay, fine. That's going to be a case series, and if that's all the people in the world that's got it, that's a lot of evidence, right? Like, as much as you can get. That's as much as it. Yeah. So unless it's that, evaluate your sources, look at the methodology, look at the statistics. And to do that, you have to have at least a university degree, because they just don't teach it elsewhere. It's a university level type of learning. And let's face it, you don't need to have a university degree to be an excellent personal trainer. You don't need to have a sports science degree, but you can go learn about research methods and statistics, and you can do these things. You may not like it. I hate it. I personally hate it.
It's hard.
It is hard. I hate it. But, you can learn if you want to, or you can ask other people for advice, but realize that you're getting their biases. So there's some great research review networks that you can join where people review it. You can listen to podcasts from the researchers. But again, you have to have those foundations for thinking to really be able to ask the questions to make sure that they're controlling for their biases and their assumptions, and to help, ask them if they've controlled for their logical fallacies that they may have fallen into. Yeah. So, good researchers won't get upset if you ask them about these things, but they're also peppered with attacks so much that they too, being human, may see it as an attack. And so carefully wording that is super important.
Totally. Now, with universities, especially a physio school, to my understanding, there are usually 2 models: the PSB model, which is the posture structure biomechanics, and the psychosocial model. Just run through quickly what the main differences are between the 2.
Yeah, so the postural structural biomechanical model is your classic posture, alignment, bell rung up, bell rung down, anterior pelvic tilt, posterior pelvic tilt, neutral spine, centered hips, centering the shoulders, activating the core, making sure your glutes are working and activating the glutes. It's worrying about having the proper technique, and there's this ideal technique that you have to hit, otherwise injury risk goes through the roof. All of these things are part of the postural structural biomechanical model, and all of them are not supported well by the science. We know lots of people with poor posture and no pain. We know lots of people who have asymmetries, for example, and they're world champions, they're Olympians. And you can look, Michael Phelps has a kyphosis. Usain Bolt has a kyphoscoliosis. He's got a leg length discrepancy and a pelvis that rotates more one way than the other. Like he's got a stride length that's not equal. There's all sorts of stuff that is not quite right with high level athletes, and they don't have problems from them. They have problems when people try to fit them into a cookie cutter. There are lots of, like you look at Chinese weightlifters, for example, and the crazy positions that they get their knees into, because genetically they can probably tolerate that. And also the Chinese weightlifting system means that all the people who can't tolerate that way, they get left by the wayside, because there's just hundreds and thousands and thousands and thousands of athletes to choose from. Whereas, you take somebody who has a genetically different structural build, something that they were born with is what I mean by genetically different. And, certain things become better and certain things become worse. So, trying to cookie cutter everybody, toes forward on the squat. If we can get kids to go toes forward in the squat because they play a sport that requires you to go forwards all the time, the opposition is always in front of you, I think that we can affect the way that their bones grow and they will adapt to that position because they have growth plates. But trying to take that and apply that to an adult, that's a lot different. Like adults tend not to have growth plates anymore. So we tend to then put it through the joints and they can irritate the joints, even to the point of damage. And so being able to let go of some of these ideals for other principles, considering the whole person, that's a biopsychosocial model. It's considering all of those things, posture, alignment, the coordination of their muscles, all of those things are important, but they're not the be all and end all. And that's what the biopsychosocial model it wants to describe, so that you can take into account their mental state as well as what's going on in their social life and who their friends are and how they're affecting things. Because anyone who's trained clients before, or high-level athletes, or even low-level athletes, will know that when you get fatigued, or when you get somebody who is fatigued, stressed at work, somebody's sick in the family, or they haven't had good sleep, or they went, they've just been on holidays and they've been partying, for a week. Like all of these things are not just a physical change that's occurring in their life. It could be that someone receives a phone call that their child has broken their arm, and that will affect their behavior while they're trying to perform. So all of that matters. And I think it's silly if we don't recognize that. So if you only focus on posture, alignment, the structures, the coordination, I think you're leaving a lot on the table. And to be honest, fitness professionals are really, really good at helping people with their stress and what's going on in their life. And lots of people see trainers not just for the training, but for all the other things that they love about having a personal trainer, which actually isn't about their knowledge and skill. It's often about how much they get on with that person who is able to help motivate them, because it is a holistic approach. And the same thing goes for the healthcare providers as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I look back to 5-6 months ago, right, my whole approach to a coaching, because as a trainers, we are taught, you have to, you get a client, the first thing you have to do is the overhead squat assessment, make sure their toes and knees are aligned and all that stuff. And while it worked, it really didn't work for a lot of my clients. And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure what is happening here, right? I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. Now, a thing that I've noticed is the whole idea of pelvic tilting, how anterior pelvic tilting is bad for you. It means you have a weak core, right? Let's try and break that belief down a little bit.
Okay, so APT, anterior pelvic tilt. So the first question I always want to ask when people ask me about anterior pelvic tilt is define anterior pelvic tilt. At what point do you enter anterior pelvic tilt? How can you tell without an X-ray what neutral is? How do you know at what point they've got an anterior pelvic tilt? That's the first question. And if you think that it's going to be ASIS and pubic symphysis and them being level is neutral, well, then you're going to be in for a shock because, surprise, surprise, humans are built individually and variably, even side to side, with how prominent that ASIS is. And then if you tell me that, oh, no, the X-ray shows that they've got a equal pelvis, okay, fantastic. So where on this bone that is about an inch or maybe more long, the ASIS, and at least a centimetre, half an inch wide, point to me the one spot at which you're measuring, because then it's overlaid by skin and fat and muscle attachments as well. Well, and so I don't know where anterior pelvic tilt is, number one. Number two, if it's indicative of a weak core, which part of the core? Is it because they're extended and their rectus is not there and they've got a thorax that is extended, or as some people would say, bell rung up, and that's indicative of a weak core? Well, maybe. Or what if their core is strong enough and they're allowing their back muscles to extend them more? What if that's the case? Or what if their bones in their spine are shaped in a way which means that they just have a lot of natural lordosis in their spine, and you're trying to correct something that structurally it may not want to correct, because correct in inverted commas. So there's a lot of things that are wrong with that for me. And then people will tell me, oh, but then you get shortened hip flexors. And it's like, okay, maybe shortened hip flexors because of APT, but have you actually tested true hip extension? Because we have a definition for that. And then at what point do you call it short? Is it if you can't do 10 degrees of hip extension, then you have shortened, like decreased hip extension? What if it's the hip? What if it's the hip capsule that's the reason why, and actually not the hip flexor? Or what if it's actually because they've got a bony osteophyte at the back of their hip, which prevents them from extending their hip, and that's something that they were born with? Or they've got an acetabulum, a hip socket that points forwards, which means that they've got flexion forever, and so it faces forwards and up. They've got flexion forever and hardly any hip extension, and you may be trying to force this hip extension issue. But not only that, that's all structural stuff. You've given somebody a label which they'll carry around with for the rest of their life if things don't change, like I have tight hip flexors, I have a weak core, which then means that they've got a psychological load that they're carrying around with them all the time because they think they're broken or wrong in some way. And then they see themselves in the mirror and then they're ashamed of the fact that they were fearfully and wonderfully made with a prominent pelvis and, a booty, and somebody tells them that they're wrong because of that and they can't posterior tilt, or they can never get their back flat on the floor when they try to do exercises with their legs straight. They always have to bend their knees to try and get their back flat on the floor. And even then, some people can't get their back on the floor. And it's not because they're fat or have a fat ass that they can't get their back on the floor. It's literally because they're built that way. How is it that we are labeling people and it's okay because we have some sort of certificate or degree that tells us that we're allowed to do this? Like, absolutely. That's breaking it down as far as I'm concerned. Like, there's so many things wrong with it. It's not funny.
Absolutely. And I know one of the things that you teach is the power of language, the power of our words. In your journey, was there any point of your journey where you thought, okay, I'm actually hurting people with my words, and that's when you decided to start making those changes?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There was this one particular client that I saw, and this is years ago. This is like basically almost 20 years ago now. And she came in and she had what appeared to be anterior pelvic tilt. And I was still in the postural structural biomechanical model. And so I told her to correct her posture. Mm. And, she did. And the way that I taught her how to do it was I stacked her thorax on top of her pelvis. I've been doing this for decades. Stacked her pelvis on top of her thorax. And, I taught her how to stand there. And then she went away and she was better. I helped her in the two sessions or 3 sessions that I saw her, but I'd written J-Lo posture on her file back in the days when you actually used a handwritten file. And so she came back in a few years later and I recognized her face and I looked at her and I did not recognize her body. And she had not put on any weight at all. She was 18 at the time I first saw her and she was 21 now. And she looked the same in her facial features and everything. But her posture was completely different. She had no curves in her back at all. She had a very straight back. And I asked her, I had to confirm her details and her identity and where she lived because I'd written J-Lo posture and I'd never seen somebody go from having basically a booty like J-Lo to somebody who had a cliff face and no booty at all. And she hadn't lost weight or anything. And I said to her, I've written, and I showed her, I said, I've written J-Lo posture because we had a laugh about it. And she said, yeah, everyone tells me that I've got J-Lo, And yeah, she had a look. And I showed her the file and she said, yeah, so what I've been doing since I last saw you is that when you corrected my posture, it felt like I had tension in the front. And so I know that I get into the right posture when I feel that tension. So she just kept chasing the feeling of correction and she overcorrected. She overcooked it. And that was my fault because my words, labeling her as having a J-Lo posture, telling her that she had anterior pelvic tilt, teaching her that, it's going to feel like this when you're in the right position, just thinking that a teenager would just forget that after a few days or a few hours because teenagers, all of these assumptions that I had, they harmed her in an aesthetic way and carried this with her for 3 years. So then I had to go through the process of basically apologizing and correcting my problems and my mistakes that I'd put on top of her. That was a really clear moment. And there are countless moments that still happen now where I say something that I think, oh, wow, that did not go the way that I was trying to go for, and unintentionally hurt people with my words. So it's a daily struggle.
It's a journey for all of us, right? And I think for people who work in the health and fitness industry, as long as we try to make those changes, as long as we try to serve the people we serve in the best possible way, then we're doing okay. Antony, I could talk to you all day. Right, I have to have you back here again. But one thing I just wanted to talk about now. Do you think there's a common thread that we can take between the PSB model and the psychosocial, and so that they can meet in the middle and we can bridge the gap and hopefully help people like me, who are trying to help others actually do a better job at helping them?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is. I think the first thing to do if you do want to consider moving out of that structural biomechanical model that you were taught in all the fitness education things, I think one of the easiest things to do is just to ask the question why. Why do I believe these things? Why do other people teach it? And what are some of the things? Try to find evidence that proves that that is wrong. So it's very easy to find the things that agree with what we believe. Try
Yeah.
to find the things that disagree and then evaluate those sources and challenge that. And if that's too much for you right now, which I'm okay with, like honestly, I just meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
If you're just on the journey of looking towards being a better fitness professional, being a better healthcare provider, just walking that journey with other people who are in different parts of the journey in different places. Like in the nutrition space, for example, you would be further down the track than I.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would turn to you for help on some of the nutrition stuff. And then on some of these other things, I might be further down the track in my journey than you. And my job is to help bring you up and support you.
Yeah.
So, no matter where you are on the journey, so long as we all face the same direction, we can all help each other. So, find like minded people, find the people who are challenging the things that are taught out there, but not replacing it with a certain other way. Oh, no, that's garbage. You've got to do it this way. Hopefully, in my language, you've heard me today in this podcast say that, you know, there is no one right way. Well, like we know from science, because science is very good at telling us what doesn't work, it's very hard to actually prove something works through science. And when I say prove, I mean cause.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways that we can find correlation, but correlation doesn't equal causation. That's the foundations for thinking type stuff.
Mhm.
So, being able to recognize that we have biases and assumptions and evaluate them so that we can move forward together on this journey together. That's another fantastic way of doing it. Or simply check the meaning of the things that you're saying to people. So if I said to you, Yusra, you have APT and it means that you have a weak core, I told you that last session. Can you tell me, what do you think about that? How does that make you feel? What does that make you want to do? And you'd be surprised with the answers that come out there. And you may be shocked that people might feel a certain way that you actually don't intend. And whilst you're trying to give them information to motivate them or to tell them why they've got something wrong, maybe they come back and say, yeah, I knew that I was weak and I've been like this my whole life, and that's the reason why I've got injuries all the time. Like all of that is probably not true. And having somebody who's broken or
Yeah.
feeling broken in front of you, yet they walked in the door, and they were able to do all sorts of things before they got to your appointment. And even if they didn't walk in the door, right? Even if you're helping I've helped, high level wheelchair tennis athletes, for example. I don't ever treat them as broken. They're not broken people because they had an injury, a spinal cord injury.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you treat somebody in a wheelchair like they're broken, or you treat somebody with a disability like they're broken, they're gonna be upset with you eventually, right?
Absolutely.
Like, recognize the limitations that they have, but also, hey, let's maximize what you can do because, this is not the end. And so part of my work was with spinal cord injured people. It's really important to recognize that meeting people where they're at and empowering them no matter what is our first duty, not to break them down further unintentionally with well-meaning words. And there's that proverb which says, the path to hell, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Mhm.
Right? We usually are trying to help people, and I want people to know that I start with a basic assumption that you have helped hundreds and thousands of people already, and that you are trying to do the very best you can, which is why you take all these education courses. And I want people, if there is to be a way,
Yeah.
I want that way to be, I'm comfortable with uncertainty. There is no one proven way to work in health and fitness, because we can all find examples of things that break that rule. Those rules.
Absolutely. And I think the challenging part, at least as I carry on this journey, is being okay to not have the answers, to say, you know what, I don't know, but we can try this and that. So as Teresa said, embracing that as uncertainty and intellectual honesty, right? What would Teresa say? So once we embrace that and recognize, we may not have all the answers, it's okay. And we can help the people in front of us without having all those answers. Antony, thank you so much for everything that you do. It's been amazing having you on here. Before I let you go, can we talk about your projects, what you're working on right now, what courses you're doing, and all the amazing stuff?
Okay. Yes, there's a lot
happening.
So first of all, if you're interested in this sort of thing, I have produced a very simple course called the Foundations, the Peak Simplicity Foundations course, which will take people through some of the foundational thinking, knowledge, assessment, and management ideas, and trying to make that as science-based as possible, and I hope to grow on that. So that's number one. Number two is I have all sorts of things. If you're interested in learning about how to help female athletes return to female clients return to moderate to high intensity, whether you're a fitness provider, fitness professional, or a health professional, healthcare provider, I have the female athlete membership, which will go through real case studies that were recorded live and in person. And then we've got the female athlete course, level 1, level 2. We also have, I've got a diastasis project, the diastasis project, that's going to be coming out really soon. And that's going to be quality information, video consults, like lots of video consults at an affordable price. So I'll be looking for help on that project as well. And then I've got, that's the diastasis. And then I've got a course, if you're a professional wanting to learn more about diastasis, I've got a reframing diastasis course that's coming up, and you'll find that at reframerehab.com. They're hosting me on that. I've also got the Peak Simplicity Masterclass, which is the jewel in the crown of my education thing. And it's a 3-month intensive program which takes you through the journey that I went through and tries to condense 3 years into 3 months. And that will be beginning at the start of February. So you'll start seeing information about it in January. So that's the Peak Simplicity Masterclass. I've got the Women's Health podcast, and I've got a few other secret projects in the works as well. So, yeah, even my teaching assistants know about all of them. So, yeah, there's a few things going on, and I'm really excited for the future.
And also, Antony, I also think it's not just those who are working with athletes or people who are wanting to go into intensity or moderate intensity. As long as you're working with women in general, any of these courses are going to be amazing, because a lot of my clients aren't athletes. They're not doing anything intense, but I've learned so much and helped them in so many ways. So absolutely.
Yeah, and when I say moderate to high intensity, I really do mean moderate to high intensity for them.
Yeah.
And the World Health Organization definition of moderate intensity starts at a 3 out of 10 intensity. Okay. So more than just a simple walk. It's that I tend to say moderate is around that 5 to 7, and then the 8 to 10. And that's a relative intensity. For some of the people that I work with, getting up out of a chair without using their hands is an 8 out of 10 intensity. Like, it's hard work for them. They can only do it a few times, like 2 or 3 times, and then that's it. They can't do any more. That's a high intensity level of effort for them. And that's what I mean by that. So thank you for picking up on my lack of clarity in my language.
Thank you so much, Antony. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being my first guest. Like I said, I could talk to you all day about this stuff. You know this already. I am looking forward to having you back once your schedule eases up a little bit. I know you have a female athlete too that's starting next weekend, yeah?
Yeah, I've got lots of things on. The rest of the year is super crazy busy, but I'm always happy to carve out time to come and spend time with you, Yusra. And I really do want your podcast to take off. And well, I'd love to always catch up. If anyone wants to contact me on Facebook Messenger, it's m.me/Antony Lo, or on Instagram at Physio Detective. They're the best ways to get a hold of me, and I'm always happy to have a chat with people. Love having a chat.
I'll also include all your contact details on the show notes as well. All right, Antony, thank you very much for your time, and we'll speak soon.
Thanks, Yusra. Good luck, everybody. Thank you.